My mother sued me due to my father's cancer diagnosis. During my childhood, I was subjected to hatred, and when I decided to leave, my father sought reconciliation, but my mother did not. Reddit, I never thought I'd be writing something like this. I guess I need to get this off my chest. I've been carrying this weight for so long that it feels suffocating at times. My life has been a constant struggle with my parents and myself. This isn't just an event. It's a story about how I finally decided to break free and search for something better, something that feels like my own. I'll warn you, it's long and messy, but here it goes. Growing up, I was never the child that parents doted on or adored. My parents, particularly my father, made it clear from a young age that I was a disappointment. I wasn't the athletic, charming, or charismatic child they desired. I was quiet, introverted, and more interested in books than the footballs my father tried to force upon me. Despite my efforts to please them, nothing seemed to be enough. My mother was just as bad, if not worse. It felt like they were competing to see who could make me feel smaller. Every report card, every minor mistake I made was subjected to relentless scrutiny. My father would relentlessly berate me, insisting I would never achieve anything, while my mother's disappointment was more subtle, but no less painful. School was my only refuge, yet even that was tainted by my parents' constant disapproval. If I received an A, my father would question why it wasn't an A+, and my mother would remind me that it didn't truly matter because someone else's child was likely excelling. It was an unending cycle of striving and failing to impress them, and no matter what I did, I was never good enough. By the time I reached high school, I had become a ghost in my own home. I would retreat to my room for hours, drowning out their voices with music or the sounds of video games. I wasn't rebellious. I lacked the courage for that. I was simply invisible. They never cared about what I was doing unless it was something they could criticize. I didn't have any friends in high school either. I wasn't bullied or anything like that. I just didn't fit in. I was the weird kid who kept his head down, avoided eye contact, and never spoke unless spoken to. My parents blamed me for that too. They'd say things like, "No wonder you don't have any friends. You're so awkward. You need to put yourself out there more." I wanted to scream at them, tell them that maybe if they didn't treat me like I was worthless, I might have some confidence, but I never did. Consequently, I immersed myself in my studies, using school as an escape where I could exert control. Numbers and equations offered clarity, essays had a defined structure, and the predictability of these elements was something I desperately sought. Although I was not at the top of my class, my academic performance was satisfactory, and after years of feeling confined, I finally discovered a path to freedom. College was my salvation, offering me the opportunity to escape my parents' constant disappointment and suffocating presence. I dedicated myself to achieving a place at a reputable university, and upon acceptance, I chose not to inform my parents immediately, knowing they would not care. My father's response upon learning of my acceptance was, "I hope you don't screw it up. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Dad." The moment I left for college, a significant burden was lifted from my shoulders. Moving several hours away from home, I felt like I could finally breathe. For the first time in my life, I was living for myself, not for the expectations or judgments of others. College was challenging, yet it offered a stark contrast to the misery I had endured. Initially, I found it difficult to adapt. Despite being the same introverted and awkward individual I had always been, no one here knew me as the failure my parents had raised. No one knew the depths of my inner turmoil. I had the opportunity to start anew, and I was determined to make the most of it. I threw myself back into my studies, just like I had in high school, but this time it was different. I wasn't studying to escape. I was studying to build something for myself. During my second year, I encountered a group of individuals who would profoundly alter my life. I never anticipated forming close friendships, let alone a collective that felt like family. Yet it occurred. Jack, a confident and outgoing individual, seemed like the polar opposite of me. Maya, a quiet and artistic soul, shared my feelings of not quite fitting in. Andrew, a laid-back individual, possessed the ability to make everyone feel at ease. We met in one of our shared classes and immediately connected, although it took me some time to fully open up to them. Jack, Maya, and Andrew were the first individuals to recognize something in me beyond failure or awkwardness. For the first time, I encountered people who cared for me, who did not view me as a disappointment. Gradually, I began to trust them, sharing the truth about my past and my family with them. During my years of feeling worthless, Jack's words resonated with me profoundly. He said, "You don't owe them anything. They don't deserve you." This perspective was a revelation, as I had always felt indebted to my parents and believed I was obligated to win their approval. Hearing someone else express that I didn't have to feel that way was liberating. The years passed swiftly, and before I realized it, I was graduating. Despite the camaraderie with my peers, a persistent unease lingered in the back of my mind. I knew what awaited me upon my return home. Following the ceremony, I received a text from my father. "Don't bother coming back. You've already brought shame upon us." I was not surprised, as I had always known their disinterest in my life. However, the reminder that no matter how much I achieved, it would never be enough for them was painful. That night, I made a decision. I would never return. I packed up all my belongings and, without informing anyone, I boarded a bus to another city. I left behind the town where I had grown up, the house filled with memories of their disappointment and my family's expectations. I had no plan, no job lined up, and no real sense of what the future held. But for the first time in my life, I felt free from their criticism, their control, and the weight of their expectations. I did not inform Jack, Maya, or Andrew of my departure until I had already arrived in the new city. I anticipated that they would attempt to dissuade me, suggesting I confront my parents or attempt to mend our relationship. However, there was nothing left to salvage. My relationship with my parents was irreparably damaged, and I had no desire to repair it. They did not want me, and I did not want them. Starting over was not easy. I found a modest apartment in a less desirable area of the city and lived off my savings for a while. I applied for various jobs, but nothing seemed to stick. Each rejection felt like a confirmation of everything my parents had ever told me, that I wasn't good enough, that I would never make it on my own. But then I remembered what Jack had said. Don't owe them anything. Gradually, I began to rebuild my life. I secured a position at a modest tech startup, which, though unglamorous, provided financial stability. I threw myself into the work, just as I had with my studies, making it my new escape. Each day presented an opportunity to demonstrate to myself that I could succeed independently of my parents' support. The journey was challenging, and there were moments when I considered giving up, but I persevered. The most challenging aspect was the isolation. I had left my friends behind, and although I maintained contact, it was not the same. They couldn't comprehend why I had to leave or why I couldn't confront my parents. They couldn't truly understand what it was like to grow up in a home where you were constantly reminded of your worthlessness. It took months, but eventually I found my footing. I started making new friends at work, people who didn't know anything about my past. It was refreshing being around people who saw me for who I was now, not who I had been. I started to feel like I belonged somewhere, like maybe I wasn't as broken as I thought. Just when I thought I had escaped, my past life threw me another curveball. One day, out of the blue, I received a call from my mother. I hadn't heard from her or my father since the day of my graduation, and I had no intention of reaching out to them. But there she was, her voice shaking as she informed me that my father had been involved in an accident. He was in the hospital, and she didn't know if he would survive. For a moment, I felt nothing. The man who had spent my entire life tearing me down was lying in a hospital bed. I didn't care, but then the guilt crept in. He was still my father, no matter how much I hated him, and a part of me wondered if I should go back. Should I forgive him? Should I be there for him in his final moments? I didn't know what to do. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, replaying every horrible thing he had ever said to me, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to make things right, or at least get some closure. However, the shock came the following morning when I received a call from a lawyer, not my mother. It was revealed that my father had passed away during the night, leaving behind a will in which I was named. Despite my reluctance to inherit anything from him, including his money, possessions, or memories of my past life, my curiosity ultimately led me to agree to meet with the lawyer. That meeting was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. The lawyer presented me with a letter penned by my father before his passing. In it, he admitted to never having faith in me, believing I was destined for failure. However, as he lay on his deathbed, he acknowledged his mistake and expressed pride in me, regretting his past treatment and hoping for my forgiveness. I was left with conflicting emotions. This man, who had spent his life making me feel unworthy, was now seeking forgiveness. It seemed like too little, too late, yet it provided a sense of closure I hadn't anticipated. Leaving the lawyer's office, I felt a profound sense of uncertainty about my future. Despite not feeling fully liberated from my past, for the first time, I felt capable of moving forward. My father's passing marked the end of a chapter one had been desperately trying to escape, and although I still had much healing to undergo, I was confident that I was finally on the right path. Greetings, Reddit. I am returning with the second installment of my extraordinary journey. If you recall, my early life was marked by significant challenges. Following my college graduation, I severed ties with my parents and relocated to a new city. Rebuilding my life was not without its difficulties, but eventually, I secured a position at a tech startup. I believed that my fortunes were improving until life once again presented me with an unexpected challenge. Let us proceed without further delay. Following the tumultuous transition from my previous life to a new city, I secured a position at a mid-sized Wisconsin-based company named Nexo. They were pioneering in data analytics and cloud solutions. Although I lacked enthusiasm for technology, I recognized it as a stable starting point. I began as a junior marketing associate, relatively low-level role, but it provided financial stability. During the initial months, I adapted to the company culture, familiarized myself with its operations, and maintained a low profile. Despite not being the most extroverted individual, I formed friendships with colleagues Chris from accounting and Lily from HR. We would often meet for coffee during lunch breaks and commiserate over the mundanity of office life. One day, everything changed. I recall it vividly. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was seated at my desk, diligently working on a social media campaign for one of our smaller clients. Suddenly, I was summoned to my manager's office. Initially, I did not give it much thought, assuming it was a routine check-in. However, upon entering, I noticed an unusual atmosphere. Greg, my manager, sat behind his desk with a stern expression, flanked by HR manager Lily, whom I had previously met for coffee. "Please have a seat," Greg said in a cold and formal tone. I sat down, feeling a pit forming in my stomach. Something was wrong. "I'm going to cut to the chase," Greg began. "We have reviewed your performance, and it has not met the company's expectations. Unfortunately, we will have to let you go." I was taken aback, as I believed I was performing adequately, if not well, but here I was being informed of my dismissal. "What do you mean? Could you please be more specific?" I stammered, attempting to maintain my composure. Greg sighed, casting a glance at Lily, who offered me a sympathetic look. "Your campaigns haven't been driving the results we were hoping for. We need individuals who can hit the ground running, and unfortunately, we don't believe you are a fit for that role." I sat there, speechless. I had been fired before I had a chance to truly demonstrate my capabilities. It felt like a punch to the gut. Lily presented me with an envelope, explaining it contained my severance package. She informed me that I would be compensated for the next 2 weeks and offered career counseling services if needed. The news was overwhelming, leaving me feeling as though the foundation had been removed from beneath me. I accepted the envelope, mumbled a thank you, and left the office in a daze. Feeling the weight of disappointment and failure, I packed up my things in silence. Chris, looking shocked, approached me. "Dude, what the hell happened?" he whispered. "I got fired," I said flatly. His reaction was one of disbelief, as if I had just told him I'd been hit by a car. "That's bullshit, man, you didn't deserve this." I didn't deserve it, but it didn't matter. I was out. I gave Chris a half-hearted smile, grabbed my belongings, and left the office without looking back. For the next few weeks, I found myself descending into a profoundly dark place. I had anticipated that leaving my parents would be the most challenging endeavor I would ever undertake. But this felt like a whole new level of failure. Without a job or a clear direction, and with my savings rapidly depleting, I spent my days sending out resumes and cover letters. However, the job market was unforgiving. It seemed like no one was hiring, and the few interviews I did receive led nowhere. I felt like I was back at the starting line, trapped in a cycle of self-doubt and inadequacy. However, an unexpected turn of events occurred. One evening, while aimlessly browsing job listings, my phone vibrated with a text from an unfamiliar number. I nearly dismissed it, but something compelled me to open it. "Hey, this is Daniel Lawrence. I heard you're looking for work. Let's meet," the message read. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. A quick Google search revealed the sender's identity: Daniel Lawrence, the CEO of Nexus Solutions, a rapidly expanding tech company. I was astonished by how he had obtained my number, but I chose not to question it. This was the opportunity one had been waiting for, I replied, agreeing to meet the next day at a coffee shop downtown. Upon entering, I immediately recognized him: a tall, charismatic man in his late 40s with sharp features and a commanding presence. He waved me over to his table. "Thank you for meeting with me," I said nervously, sitting down across from him. "Of course," he replied with a smile. I had heard some positive feedback about me, but I was surprised to learn that someone had spoken highly of me. I was not inclined to argue. We engaged in a conversation, during which I shared my experience at Nexi and my subsequent dismissal. To my astonishment, he expressed genuine interest. "You have potential," he said. "After hearing your story, I believe you just haven't had the right opportunities yet." He was correct, but it was still difficult to believe that someone like him saw potential in me. Then came the offer. Although I was not actively seeking employment at the time, the opportunity to assist with a side project was presented to me. He mentioned that it was not a glamorous task, but it had the potential to evolve into something more significant if I was interested. Without hesitation, I accepted the offer, despite my lack of knowledge about the project's specifics. During the subsequent months, I collaborated closely with Daniel on various minor projects, primarily marketing-related tasks for Nexus Solutions. Although these projects were not particularly innovative, they provided me with a sense of purpose and motivation to start my day. During that period, my relationship with Daniel deepened. Contrary to my initial expectations, he was not an intimidating CEO. He was approachable, humorous, and most importantly, he had faith in me. He encouraged me to think innovatively, to take risks, and to cease my self-doubt. Approximately 6 months into our collaboration, Daniel fell ill. Initially presenting as a minor cold, it rapidly escalated into a severe condition. He was diagnosed with a serious autoimmune disorder, leading to a precipitous decline in his health. I was at a loss for what to do. Here was the person who had given me a chance when others had refused, now bedridden and fighting for his life. One evening, I received a call from him, his voice weak yet determined. "I need you to do something for me," he said. "I trust you." My heart was pounding. "What do you need?" "I'm going to be out of commission for a while," he said. "I need you to keep things running at Nexus. I've already spoken to the board. They'll support you, but I need you to lead the charge." I was stunned. Running a multi-million-dollar tech company seemed beyond my capabilities, let alone managing a business. However, Daniel was unwavering. "You're capable of more than you think," he said. "I've seen what you can do. This is your chance to prove it." The subsequent months were a whirlwind. I was suddenly thrust into a leadership role at Nexus, and I had no idea what I was doing, but somehow I managed to keep things afloat. I worked around the clock, juggling marketing campaigns, investor meetings, and internal company politics. There were moments when I thought I was going to fail, but every time I felt like giving up, I heard Daniel's voice in my head telling me I could do this. The turning point arrived when Nexus, facing challenges in increasing its market share and with competitors closing in, required a bold strategy to distinguish itself. After weeks of brainstorming, scenario analysis, and financial calculations, I devised a marketing strategy that I believed could reverse our fortunes. It was a calculated risk, reducing the price of our flagship product by 20% for a limited time to stimulate demand and expand our customer base, which would ultimately lead to long-term revenue growth. Despite initial skepticism from the board, I persisted in advocating for this approach. The campaign was launched, and within weeks, our revenue increased by 8%. I was astonished. My risky gamble had paid off, and Nexus was back in the game. Daniel called me from his hospital bed to congratulate me. He sounded weak, but there was pride in his voice. "You did it," he said. "I knew you could." The success of the campaign not only saved the company, but also solidified my position at Nexus. Upon Daniel's return to work, he extended an offer that would forever alter my life. "You've demonstrated your worth," he said. "I would like you to remain as the chief marketing officer, but there's more. I am offering you a percentage of the company's revenue as a bonus. We are now partners." I was speechless. A partnership? A share of the revenue? This was beyond anything I had ever imagined. I accepted without hesitation. During my tenure, Nexus Solutions experienced significant growth under my leadership in marketing. We launched several successful campaigns that contributed to a 21% increase in revenue. The company expanded into new markets, acquired smaller competitors, and established itself as a leading force in the industry. Daniel, who had recovered but decided to take a step back from the day-to-day operations, trusted me completely with the company's future. There were some shocking moments along the way, like the time one of our biggest competitors tried to poach me with a ludicrous offer of stock options and a cushy position, but I turned them down. Nexus was my home now. I had built something here, and I wasn't about to abandon it. Another surprise came when Daniel revealed that he had written me into his will. I wasn't just his business partner, I was his friend. He told me that if anything ever happened to him, I would inherit his shares in the company. It was an overwhelming gesture, one that left me speechless. I never thought I'd be in a position where someone would trust me with something so significant. The most astonishing moment occurred when my parents, who had essentially disowned me years prior, unexpectedly reappeared in my life. A call from my mother, expressing her pride in my achievements, felt surreal. They sought to reconcile and apologize for the years of neglect and mistreatment, but I was no longer the same person. I had grown beyond the scared, insecure child who craved their approval. I had built something for myself, something they had never believed I was capable of. Therefore, I politely declined their offer, not out of spite or anger, but because I had moved on. I had found a new family in Daniel and the people at Nexus, and that was enough for me to. 3 years into my role as CEO at Nexus, I reflect on the journey and am in disbelief. From being dismissed to leading a multi-million-dollar company, it has been an exhilarating experience. There have been numerous highs and lows, but through it all, I have learned one crucial lesson. One's past cannot dictate their future. I am uncertain about the future of Nexus or myself, but I am confident that I am not the same person I was when I first arrived in this city. I am stronger, more confident, and for the first time in my life, I feel like I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Greetings, Reddit. It's been some time since my last post, and much has transpired since then. If you have been following my journey, you are aware that I have ascended from the depths of despair, having been dismissed, to becoming a partner and ultimately the commander-in-chief at a multi-million-dollar tech company named Nexus Solutions. However, just when I believed I had escaped my past, it unexpectedly drew me back in. This segment of my narrative is significantly darker than the preceding ones. I am still processing everything, but writing has always been therapeutic for me. So here's my story. It was a quiet Saturday morning. I had just settled into my routine, coffee, a bit of work, maybe a jog later, when there was a knock on my door. At first, I thought it was a delivery, but when I opened it, there she was, my mother, the woman I hadn't seen in years, standing on my doorstep with that same cold expression I remembered from my childhood. "Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I hadn't expected to ever see her again, let alone at my own home. She looked older than I remembered, more tired, her once well-kept appearance replaced by deep lines of bitterness etched into her face. Her eyes were bloodshot, and even from where I stood, I could smell the alcohol on her breath. It was only 10 a.m. She said, "I need to talk to you," pushing past me and stepping into my house without waiting for an invitation. I stood frozen for a moment, completely thrown off guard, my mind racing. Why was she here? What did she want? The last time we spoke was when my father died, and even then it was just a brief, emotionless conversation. Now here she was, acting as though she had every right to walk into my life like nothing had happened. I closed the door and followed her into the living room, where she had already plopped herself down on the couch, her purse clutched tightly in her lap like a lifeline. I could feel the tension in the air. "Mom, if this is about Dad," I started, but she cut me off before I could finish. "Of course, this is about your father," she snapped, her voice slurred slightly from whatever she had been drinking that morning. "You think I came here for a friendly chat? You have the audacity to believe you can simply abandon your family and live a luxurious life, while I am left with nothing?" I was momentarily taken aback by the venom in her words. "What are you talking about? I didn't walk away from anything. You and Dad never wanted me. I'm just trying to build a life for myself," she sneered. "You're trying to build a life by stealing everything that should have been ours?" I had no idea what she was talking about. I hadn't stolen anything. Every bit of success I'd had came from hard work and perseverance. Before I could respond, she launched into a tirade. "You believe you can simply abscond with everything? Your father's death was a consequence of your actions." Her voice escalated, becoming shrilled. "If you hadn't left, if you hadn't abandoned us, maybe he'd still be alive. But no, you had to run off and play big shot businessman." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. She was blaming me for his death, the man who had spent my entire life belittling and tearing me down. The man who had never once shown me any love or support. It was absurd, but in that moment all the old feelings of guilt and inadequacy came rushing back. It felt as though I was being reprimanded as a child for failing to meet their unattainable standards. "I didn't abandon anyone," I said, my voice trembling yet resolute. "I left because I had to. You and Dad never cared about me, and you know it." She ignored my words, her eyes narrowing as she leaned forward. "You have a comfortable life, don't you? A large house, a prestigious job, and likely an abundance of wealth. I want my share. Your father has shaped you into the man you are, and I am entitled to something for all the years we invested in raising you." I stared at her, utterly stunned by her audacity. "You want to share?" I repeated, uncertain if I had heard her correctly. "That's right," she affirmed, her voice firming. "I am aware of the company's financial status and my contributions. Despite having nothing, you are responsible for compensating me. This situation is unprecedented." She had always been cruel, but demanding a share of the company I had worked so hard to help build was absurd. "Mom, I don't owe you anything," I said, my voice now more firm. "You and Dad made my life a living hell. I built this on my own. You didn't help me. You try to hold me back," her face twisted into an ugly scowl. "You selfish little bastard," she hissed. "You think you can just brush me off like that? Well, I've got news for you. I'm going to take you to court. I'll sue you for what's rightfully mine." At that moment, I felt a chill run down my spine. My own mother was threatening to sue me. I had no idea what legal ground she thought she had, but the threat alone sent a wave of anxiety through me. "Good luck with that," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You won't win. We'll see about that," she spat, standing up and glaring at me. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. I'm going to make sure you pay for abandoning us." And with that, she stormed out of my house, slamming the door behind her. The subsequent weeks were marked by a haze of stress and uncertainty. My mother, as promised, initiated a lawsuit against me, asserting a claim to a portion of my earnings and a share in Nexus Solutions. Her claim was baseless, lacking any legal foundation, but the fact that she had pursued it left me shaken. I had never been sued before, let alone by my own mother. Anthony Wilkins, her attorney, was a low-tier practitioner. After the lawsuit was filed, I investigated him and discovered that he specialized in representing clients who could not afford quality legal representation. My mother's alcoholism made her an easy target for someone like him. He likely saw her as a quick financial opportunity, but the prospect of facing her in court was profoundly unsettling. Daniel, my business partner and friend, remained remarkably composed when I informed him of the situation. "She has no case," he stated. "She's just trying to extort you. Don't let her get to you." However, it was easier said than done. As the weeks passed, the looming lawsuit began to weigh heavily on me. My mother's persistent attempts to undermine me were as relentless as ever. Each day felt like a battle to maintain the stability of my life. Then one day, something unexpected occurred. I received a call from a man named Kevin O'Donnell. He was a private investigator I had hired to investigate my mother's lawyer, just to ensure there were no surprises awaiting me in court. What Kevin discovered completely altered the course of the case. Anthony Wilkins is not only cheap but also dishonest, as Kevin revealed over the phone. He has been involved in several questionable transactions, including accepting bribes and fabricating evidence. The individual is known for their willingness to compromise. I felt a glimmer of hope. "You think he can be bought?" I inquired, my mind already racing. "Absolutely," Kevin affirmed. "If you make the right offer, he'll collapse like a cheap suit." I understood the risks, but I was desperate. My mother had ensnared me in this predicament, and I was determined not to succumb to her manipulations. Therefore, I instructed Kevin to arrange a meeting with Wilkins. The meeting was held in a dimly lit bar located on the outskirts of the city. It felt like stepping into a scene from a poorly executed crime drama, but this was my new reality. Upon my arrival, Wilkins was seated at a booth in the back, nursing a glass of whiskey. He appeared even more disheveled than anticipated, with a wrinkled tie and bloodshot eyes, likely a result of a combination of alcohol and sleep deprivation. I slid into the booth opposite him and exchanged a tense greeting. "You know why I'm here?" I said, cutting straight to the point. He gave me a crooked smile. "I do," he said, taking a sip of his drink. "Your mother harbors a great deal of resentment, believing she is entitled to everything you possess. I believe you are aware of this." Wilkins shrugged, leaning back in his seat. "Perhaps, but that's not really my concern, is it? My role is to advocate for her." "I understand your responsibilities," I said, lowering my voice, "but I also know you have a price." He raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Continue." I laid out the offer for him. "If you abandon the case and depart, you will receive $50,000 in cash, with no questions asked." Wilkins paused for a moment, his eyes narrowing as he contemplated the proposition. 50 grand. That's right, I said, my heart pounding in my chest. "It's more than you'll ever get from my mother." He let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. "You've got a lot of balls, kid, but I'll tell you what. I'll take it. You'll have the case dismissed by the end of the week." I didn't trust myself to speak. I just nodded and stood up, sliding an envelope with half the money across the table. "You'll get the rest when the case is dropped." Wilkins grinned, pocketing the envelope. "It was a pleasure doing business with you." After leaving the bar, I felt a significant burden had been lifted from my shoulders. Although it was not the most ethical decision I had ever made, I was determined not to let my mother's actions jeopardize the success I had achieved. A week later, justice was promised, and the case was dismissed. My mother's lawyer had withdrawn, citing irreconcilable differences with his client. My mother was furious, of course. She called me, screaming and cursing, demanding to know what I had done, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of a response. I blocked her number and went back to focusing on my life. But even though I had won the legal battle, the emotional toll lingered. My own mother had tried to destroy me. She had blamed me for my father's death, tried to extort me, and dragged me into a legal nightmare. The whole experience left me feeling drained, bitter, and disillusioned. I had hoped to leave my past behind, but it seemed determined to haunt me no matter how far I ran. In the months that followed, I threw myself into my work at Nexus. The company was thriving, and under my leadership, we launched several new projects that took our revenue to new heights. We expanded into international markets, acquired a couple of smaller startups, and became a dominant player in the tech industry. On the surface, everything appeared flawless, but internally, I was grappling with the aftermath of my mother's betrayal. Daniel, who had always been close to me, noticed a change in my demeanor. Following the lawsuit, I became more reserved and cautious. Despite his attempts to discuss the matter, I was not prepared to open up. The reality was that I was unsure how to process the situation. How do you move forward when the person who is supposed to love you without condition betrays you in such a manner? Eventually, I sought therapy. It was not an easy journey, as I had always been the type to suppress my emotions and endure pain silently. However, my therapist helped me recognize that I had been burdened by the rejection of my parents for far too long. The lawsuit was merely the culmination of years of unresolved trauma. Through therapy, I began to heal. I learned to let go of the guilt, the anger, and the need for validation from people who had never truly cared about me. It was a slow process, but I started to feel lighter, freer. Regarding my mother, I have not heard from her since the lawsuit. I assume she continues to self-destruct through alcohol, but I no longer feel responsible for her choices. I have come to terms with the fact that I cannot alter the past or the individuals within it. All I can do is move forward. 3 years after my mother's lawsuit, I am still standing stronger than ever. Even Nexus Solutions is thriving, and I have built a life for myself that I am proud of, one that I created on my own terms. Life is full of unexpected twists and lessons, but if there's one thing I've learned, it's that you can't let the past control you. People will try to drag you down, even those who are supposed to lift you up. But at the end of the day, the only person you can rely on is yourself. Thank you for listening, Reddit. It feels good to have shared this.